This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. We are sending our thoughts and prayers to the two hero National Guard troops who have been shot in DC by a crazed gunman. A suspect has been identified as a 29-year-old Afghan national who reportedly entered the US in 2021 under Biden's Operation Allies Welcome program. Now, President Donald Trump has posted the animal that shot the two National Guardsmen, with both being critically wounded and now in two separate hospitals, is also severely wounded, but regardless will pay a very steep price. God bless our great National Guard and all of our military and law enforcement. These are truly great people. I, as President of the United States, and everyone associated with the office of the presidency, am with you. Here is Vice President J.D. Vance calling on everybody who is a person of faith to say a prayer for the two National Guardsmen.
Apparently there was a shooting outside the White House just a couple of hours ago. And we're still learning everything. We still don't know the motive. There's a lot that we haven't yet figured out. But what we do know is that a couple of National Guardsmen were injured in the line of duty. And first of all, I want everybody who's a person of faith to say a prayer for those two National Guardsmen, that they're able to spend Thanksgiving with their families instead of losing their lives, because I understand they're still in pretty tough condition. But I think it's a somber reminder that soldiers, whether they're active duty, reserve, or National Guard, our soldiers are the sword and the shield of the United States of America. And as a person who goes into work every single day in that building and knows that there are a lot of people who wear the uniform of the United States Army, let me just say very personally, thank them for what they're doing. We're grateful to them, and we're praying that they're going to be safe and they're going to spend Thanksgiving with their families. God bless them.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced that they will be sending an additional 500 troops to DC. He says that we'll never back down.
President Trump has asked me, and I will ask the Secretary of the Army, to the National Guard to add 500 additional troops, National Guardsmen, to Washington, D.C. This will only stiffen our resolve to ensure that we make Washington, D.C. safe and beautiful. The drop in crime has been historic. The increase in safety and security has been historic. But if criminals want to conduct things like this, violence against America's best, we will never back down.
Now, ever since Donald Trump sent National Guard troops to DC to drastically improve safety in the city, Democrats, left-wing activists, they have been pushing against it, in many cases demonizing troops. Here's one example.
We believe that the National Guard and the military occupation is the first step into rounding black people up and putting them in detainment camps here in Washington, D.C. and around the United States of America. We believe that.
And here is Alyssa Slotkin, one of the 6 Democrats who posted a video calling on the military to defy illegal orders, only to admit that there have been no illegal orders. Suggested that just a few days ago, she suggested that the National Guard could randomly start shooting at Americans.
Look at these videos coming out of places like Chicago. It makes me incredibly nervous that we're about to see people in law enforcement, people in uniform military, get nervous, get stressed, shoot at American civilians. It is a very, very stressful situation for these law enforcement and for the communities on the ground. So it was basically a warning to say, like, if you're asked to do something, particularly against American citizens.
And now 2 National Guard troops have been shot. And what about the leftist media's coverage of the deployment of National Guard troops? We know it's been awful, but how awful? Well, here's a CNN guest just a few weeks ago comparing National Guard troops to Nazis.
Actually, what the president is doing through the Secretary of Defense is creating units, official military units, to, quite frankly, watch the American people. And that's the thing that is absolutely abhorrent. It reminds me so much of what happened in Germany in the 1930s.
And how is the media covering this horrific shooting of National Guard troops? Here's MSNBC's coverage.
Of course, you know, there's so much controversy happening in the United States right now with ICE, who are also wearing uniforms and wearing masks. And so there's, you don't know, people walking around with uniforms in an American city. There are some Americans that might object to that. And so apparently this shooting has happened.
It is sick. Joining us now is Josh Hammer, Senior Editor-at-Large at Newsweek. Josh, thank you for joining us today. Let's start with this horrific shooting in DC. 2 National Guard troops are fighting for their lives after being shot. They were both members of the West Virginia National Guard, and we are starting to learn more about the suspect, the person who is accused of shooting the 2 National Guard members. That person has been identified as 29-year-old Afghan national Ramallah Lakanwal, according to media reports. He allegedly entered the US in 2021 under Joe Biden's Operation Allies Welcome program. Josh, can I get your reaction to this horrific tragedy?
Well, the first thing to note, Gabrielle, is that it is just that. This is a horrific tragedy. It has happened on the eve of what I think most Americans would consider our de facto #1 national holiday. Of course, Independence Day, July 4th, is a major national holiday here where we fly the flag, but Thanksgiving really is the quintessential American holiday. And for this to happen on the eve of Thanksgiving is pretty unconscionable. It is pretty unconscionable on the one hand. On the other hand, this is the sad part, even sadder part, frankly. It is all too eminently predictable. I mean, going back to 2021, this Biden operation, I mean, the entire withdrawal from Afghanistan was completely botched in the first place. Not the mere act of withdrawing. I actually was calling for the United States to withdraw for many years prior to that, but the manner in which it was done was just so extraordinarily chaotic. And then to have this program where you bring in, by some estimates, nearly 90,000, between 80 and 90,000 Afghans. Some of them were genuine interpreters who actually helped the United States Armed Forces during the 2 decades in Afghanistan there. But you are playing with fire every time that you bring in people from that culture that is that incredibly foreign. And clearly, whatever attempts at vetting the Biden administration may or may not have done, and count me in the camp that was, they were probably not giving much attention at all. Probably they were probably just opening the door. After all, they were literally letting in 5, 6, 7, 8 million by some estimates of illegal aliens there. So why are they going to bother to vet the legal ones there? So on the other hand, this is just so eminently predictable. And he apparently was shouted Allahu Akbar, which jihadists shout before they mow down innocent civilians. And it's just awful. It's just absolutely awful. And it is yet another wake-up moment for America's completely sclerotic and upside-down, backwards immigration regime. Hopefully the Trump administration doubles down trying to rectify its predecessor's horrific mistakes.
Absolutely awful. The other part in this is the Democrats and left-wing media activists, I should say, have been, in many cases, demonizing National Guard troops. Here's J.B. Pritzker claiming that Trump's deployment of the National Guard was an attack on the American people and will be used to stop the 2026 elections.
Other than fighting crime. That's the first thing they should understand. The second is it's an attack on the American people by the President of the United States. Now, he may disagree with a state that didn't vote for him, but should he be sending troops in? No.
You said he has other aims. What are the other aims?
The other aims are that he'd like to stop the elections in 2026 or, frankly, take control of those elections.
Look, I know it's early into the investigation that will no doubt take place. We don't know what the motive is yet, but you hear that message on repeat. You tell that message to Americans on repeat. It just takes one psychopath to become violent.
Do you know how out of touch with reality you have to be to think that Donald Trump called in the National Guard in the nation's capital to try to take control of the 2026 election? I mean, is that what J.B. Pritzker just said? I mean, I'm trying to make sure that my earpiece is incorrect.
No, that was correct.
I mean, the orders of magnitude of lunacy, of left-wing echo chamber from MS Now, MSNBC, whatever they're calling it, the level of delusion that you have to consume in your media diet to actually make that assertion ostensibly without any hint of irony there is just utterly astounding. And yes, you're totally right that the left-wing media complex has been demonizing the National Guard ever since Donald Trump a few months ago decided to launch this righteous operation, I might say. The nation's capital has become not just a laughing stock, it's become a crime-ridden hellhole. It's actually gotten a lot better, by the way, since the National Guard took over there. There's been all sorts of data indicating that violent crime, property crime, indeed have declined since the National Guard actually went into the streets there. So, I mean, what in the world are they doing there? But more generally speaking, whether it's the demonization of the National Guard, whether it's the demonization of President Trump himself, haven't these people learned their lesson? Haven't we seen that bad things happen when you demonize your political opposition to this level there? You would have thought that maybe Democrats would have learned their lesson when it comes to Donald Trump after the near assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania, or perhaps after the second attempted assassination in West Palm Beach, Florida, just over a year ago. If nothing else, Gabriella, after the actual assassination of my friend Charlie Kirk, the most high-profile political assassination in America since Martin Luther King Jr. and RFK back in 1968. This rhetoric is insane. It is insane and is quite literally getting people killed. And I will repeat the message that I've been saying for many months now, which is, are there any senior statesmen left on the Democratic side of the aisle, anyone, whether it's a Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, whoever has some kind of gravitas with that party, to just get there and say, stop demonizing law enforcement, stop demonizing the military, stop demonizing the political opposition, calling them a bunch of Nazis, Hitlerites, Stalinists, whatever. It's crazy and it's horrifying. And until that happens, Gabriella, I fear this is just not going to stop.
Oh, absolutely. It is so horrifying. It hasn't even been 3 months since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. We look at the left-wing media coverage. Frequently, the coverage has been awful. We just played earlier on the show a guest on CNN comparing National Guard troops to Nazis. And let's just look at the live coverage of the tragedy that unfolded today on ABC.
Focus will turn to whether these guardsmen were specifically targeted. If that's the case, it would fit with what we've been hearing from law enforcement officials for a number of months now, that some political flashpoints in the country, whether that's immigration policies by the administration, the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, even amid a tenuous ceasefire, those kinds of flashpoints have made people in uniform, be they military, law enforcement, government officials, people in uniform, have increasingly been targets, and that is going to be one focus of the investigation going forward.
Yeah, I mean, 2 National Guard troops were just shot while, serving and trying to protect America. You mentioned Charlie Kirk. It hasn't even been 3 months since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, was killed for speaking the truth. He was demonized for a long time. He still is. And we've seen Donald Trump. He's been compared to Hitler countless times by parts of the left, whether it's the media, some Democrats. He survived an assassination attempt, as you spoke about. Are we ever going to see the left turn down the temperature when it comes down to its messaging?
I mean, Gabrielle, there's too many examples to count. I mean, Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk are the most high-profile ones. How about the slaughter of the 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C. back in May? That was a left-wing, pro-Palestine fanatic. There was the attempted assassination of Brett Kavanaugh on the U.S. Supreme Court in 2022. There was the shooting up of the Republican congressional baseball team back in 2017, almost fatally wounding Steve Scalise. I mean, on and on we go. I mean, there's just too many examples there. I mean, how about all of the violent attacks on Tesla vehicles earlier this year, simply because Elon Musk had the temerity to sign up to help his country in patriotic fashion by trying to trim some fat out of the federal budget. So the left has a violent streak. We know that because they've literally had that since the advent of what it even means to be on the left during the French Revolutionary period, the old school Jacobins and Robespierre's reign of terror. So modern leftism started with a violent flair, and that unfortunately very much continues today. They're always trying to get some sort of next revolution in their addle-brained minds there. Again, I don't think this is going to get any better. I would very much like to say that it's going to get any better, but unless and until the American left, and that really in this case I think means Democratic Party leaders, get a hold of their base, because their base is so far out there, Gabrielle.
Yeah.
Their base is so far out there. The polls just showed this over and over again. There was a poll out of Harvard University a few months ago, around the time of Charlie's assassination. This poll out of Harvard, I think it was even after Charlie's assassination, this poll out of Harvard said that roughly 1/3, 33 to 35% of Harvard students think that violence can indeed, yes, it can be appropriate to prevent a speaker from speaking at Harvard University campus. This is Harvard, okay? This is the most famous university arguably in the world. Something is deeply, deeply, deeply malfunctioning in the American left-wing brain, and it calls for leaders, if there are any left, to speak up with all the might they've got.
Absolutely. It's absolutely terrifying. Josh, I want to get your thoughts on the Seditious Six, as they're known now. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has slammed the group of Democrats who created this video that appeared to be actively encouraging current service members to disobey orders from Donald Trump. Let's take a look.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
Only there have not been illegal orders. But this is what Pete Hegseth had to say on X. He wrote the despicable video urging Department of War troops to refuse illegal orders may seem harmless to civilians, but it carries a different weight inside the military. This was a politically motivated influence operation. It never named a specific illegal order. It created ambiguity rather than clarity. It used carefully scripted legal sounding language. It subtly reframed military obedience around partisan distrust instead of established legal processes. In the military, vague rhetoric and ambiguity undermines trust, creates hesitation in the chain of command, and erodes cohesion. The military already has clear procedures for handling unlawful orders. It does not need political actors injecting doubt into an already clear chain of command. As veterans of various sorts, the Seditious Six knew exactly what they were doing, sowing doubt through a politically motivated influence operation. The Department of War won't fall for it or stand for it. Josh, can I get your reaction to this?
Yeah, it's hard to know where to begin. I mean, really, it's hard to know where to begin here. I mean, this is so egregious that there's just so many different layers to the egregiousness. First of all, they can't name a single illegal order, as we just saw Secretary Hegseth say. Two, even if there were to be an order that an officer, using all of his or her good faith, thought was actually illegal, as Hegseth again alludes to, there are well-established procedures for this. You take your objection, your possible quibble, to a military court, to a military tribunal. There are indeed established procedures for trying to do this sort of thing. The alternative is that there are no procedures, which takes us to the land of a Nazi or communist regime, which seems to be the not so subtle implication that is lurking in the background of this whole video, is that they really are analogizing the current United States military to the Third Reich, to the Wehrmacht, right? I mean, to their military, to the communist armed forces there, because when you start emphasizing this, what you're really saying is that there's no greater moral or legal authority in the United States Armed Forces, the most effective fighting force in the entire history of mankind, than there is with the Nazis or the communists. So it is just so utterly loathsome. There's also the idea that if an officer has a lawful order and refuses to actually abide by his superior, there's actually a separate crime for that. It's called mutiny. And mutiny in the United States carries a very, very, very severe punishment, potentially up to and including death, if it is actually taken to its logical conclusion. We haven't had such a case in many years there. It seems like these Democrats actually want to see that happen. So by far, the most likely outcome, if God forbid some mistaken officer in the military actually takes the Seditious Six at their word, by far the most likely outcome would actually be a mutiny prosecution there. And these Democrats would be nowhere to be found. I mean, they're just doing this for pure political point scoring. The silver lining here is that the Department of War, as we just saw, is taking this quite seriously. Looks like Mark Kelly is being individually investigated for possible court-martialing there in the United States Navy, where he is a retired captain. I would personally very much like to see that. At a bare minimum, when it comes to the senators there, Kelly and Slotkin, they have completely desecrated the integrity of the United States Senate, which once upon a time was known as the world's greatest deliberative body. And if I were advising John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, I would essentially say as follows: you ought to hold a vote ASAP to expel these two people, because they have desecrated in irrevocable fashion, I would say, the integrity of the United States Senate. This is completely inexcusable. And the final thing I will say is that this really ought to expose the lie that there are such things, for the most part, as moderate Democrats these days. Mark Kelly of Arizona and Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan are from swing states here. Arizona and Michigan are two of the major swing states. And they've been sold to us as moderate Democrats there. No, they're not. They're literally encouraging insurrection. They're encouraging mutiny. With the exception of maybe John Fetterman, maybe, and like maybe one or two others there really aren't moderate Democrats. That kind of gets us back to our previous conversation, that who is the actual moderate statesman who can call up political violence? How can you do that when you're literally calling for a military insurrection on these propagandistic videos? I mean, the whole thing is just awful, but that's what we're dealing with, Gabriella. They are a radicalized bunch.
Yeah, 100%. We keep saying that. Look, Donald Trump has revealed his plans to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organisation. The White House said in a statement that President Trump is confronting the Muslim Brotherhood's transnational network, which fuels terrorism and destabilisation campaigns against US interests and allies in the Middle East. Now, this designation would make it illegal to provide support for the group, would also lead to economic sanctions, of course, banning its members from entering the United States. Josh, your reaction, how significant is this?
Well, it's very good, and it's something that many of us have been calling for a very, very long time. I've been calling to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization for probably a decade. I mean, the UAE has done it. Saudi Arabia has done it. There are any number of non-Islamist Arab countries that have done it, so it makes no sense whatsoever as to why the United States would be taking a friendlier attitude towards the Muslim Brotherhood, or frankly, towards the Muslim Brotherhood's American offshoot, which is CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which actually was declared itself a terrorist organization by the UAE back in 2014. It makes no sense why the United States would ever have a friendlier posture, friendlier stance towards these organizations than various other Arab countries. So it's very good insofar as it goes. The only problem is that it does not go far enough. So what they basically did, Gabrielle, the way that the Muslim Brotherhood operates is it essentially operates as a franchise network where you have various offshoots in certain jurisdictions that then get the Muslim Brotherhood franchise. So for instance, Hamas is probably the most well-known Muslim Brotherhood offshoot for the Palestinian Arabs. So what the executive order does is it singles out a handful of Muslim Brotherhood chapters, namely Lebanon, Egypt, and Jordan, and says that these are indeed foreign terrorist organizations. Again, that should have happened a long time ago, but it's very good. I mean, certainly better late than never. But in order to really have true teeth here, you're going to have to go after the Brotherhood where they are financially and ideologically sponsored. And that means really two countries above all. It means Turkey and it means Qatar. That's complicated because the United States has nuclear weapons in Turkey. Turkey is also part of NATO. Qatar is an infamously thorny situation where there is the Al Udeid American Air Base there. Trump signed this NATO Article 5 style mutual defense pledge to Qatar a few months ago there. So that, to me, is where the rubber meets the road, is can this administration really stare down Qatar and Turkey as being the duplicitous actors that they are when it comes to funding and disseminating the seeds of horrific Islamism and the Brotherhood the world over? That will be fascinating to see. But for now, it's definitely a step in the right direction.
And just finally, there's been a breakthrough in the war between Russia and Ukraine. This week, Trump directed Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to travel to Moscow for talks with Putin on the emerging agreement to end the war in Ukraine. And Trump seems pretty optimistic. He posted that over the past week, my team has tremendous prospects with respect to ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. And he said that the original 28-point peace plan, which was drafted by the US, has been fine-tuned with additional input from both sides. And there are only a few remaining points of disagreement. I look forward to hopefully meeting with President Zelensky and President Putin soon, but only when the deal to end this war is final or in its final stages. Look, he certainly deserves credit as a peacemaker around the world, doesn't he, Josh?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Look, I mean, this has been the most difficult deal for him to reach. I mean, he's reached any number of other peace deals, certainly since he took over back in January, whether it is Thailand and Cambodia or Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Congo and Rwanda, India and Pakistan, two nuclear powers there, the Iran-Israel war back in June. So he's done this many times, but Russia-Ukraine continues to be the really, 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 really difficult one. And it's really difficult for a lot of reasons, that you have two sides that simply just don't want to give in. Now, Trump is trying really, really hard there. I mean, he met with Putin in Alaska, and then the following Monday, he met with Zelensky, flanked by various major European leaders, Meloni of Italy, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, etc., all there at the White House. That was back in August, if memory serves. So he's trying really, really hard here. Now, Ukraine, if I understand correctly, the U.S. had this 28-point plan. They trimmed it down to a 19-point plan. They made some concessions to Zelensky and the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have tentatively accepted this. What I am seeing, Gabriella, and I think the New York Post actually reported this, is that Russia is set to reject this current iteration of the deal. So we will see. That's not confirmed yet, but what I've heard and what the New York Post is reporting is that Putin is set to reject this current iteration of the deals. We might just get back to where we started. And that's unfortunate because this war has gone on for way, way, way too long. This February, God forbid it, the war is still going on and will be 4 years since Putin invaded the Donbass and Crimea back in February of 2022. The war has to end, and has to end, frankly, for Ukraine's own sake, because this is going to take Ukraine a half century, at least, frankly, to try to recover from the human casualties, the mass population exodus, the flights of human capital, social capital, financial capital. I mean, it's been an utter and complete disaster for Ukraine and for Russia, although that they are clearly the aggressor in this conflict. But the war has to end, and I think that we should all be praying that it does there. But to your point, certainly Donald Trump deserves credit, if nothing else. He really has tried quite hard to get a deal here.
Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabriella.
Nigeria's president has declared a nationwide security emergency following a wave of mass kidnappings that have seen hundreds of people, mostly school children, captured. Joining us now is Bernard Tutunji, National Director of the Aid to the Church in Need. Bernard, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is horrific. More than 300 children and staff were kidnapped by gunmen from a Catholic school in central Nigeria this week, making it one of the worst mass abductions the country has seen. Now, the Christian Association of Nigeria said 303 students and 12 teachers were taken from St Mary's School in Papiri. A nun from the Sisters of Our Lady of Apostles, whose order runs the school, has described the night that the armed men stormed the Catholic school. Let's listen.
Around 1 o'clock in the morning, a large group of armed bandits, as they're termed in Nigeria, arrived on motorbikes and with vans, and very orderly went from dormitory to dormitory collecting the children, tried to get to the convent but didn't manage to breach the convent, but took as many children as they could. We thought that many children had actually escaped into the bush. They had ran, but they too were caught later. 315 people were taken, were kidnapped. 303 of them are children, some from the primary school, some from the secondary school.
More than 250 children and a dozen teachers are still being held right now. Bernard, can I get your thoughts on the kidnapping and how a situation this extreme, how has it been able to continue?
Thanks, Gabriella, for having us. I mean, what does one say? I have 3 children in a small primary school not far from where I'm sitting, and I've been thinking how it would resonate if gunmen stormed that school, loaded those children into vans and took them away. The pain is unimaginable. I mean, if anything good comes from this, I'm relieved to see the mainstream media covering these horrific realities. Hundreds of destroyed churches didn't seem to make the headlines. Murdered priests didn't make it. 200 Christians being burned alive didn't make it. I think, we need to consider as a nation what our threshold for international violence is before we pay attention. I'm glad to see the Nigerian bishops have released a joint letter just 2 days ago decrying the situation, calling on the government to fulfill its foremost duty to protect the lives and property of its citizens.
Well, there's been, I would say, little international pressure. What does it tell us about the Nigerian government's ability or willingness to protect its own people? I understand that Nigeria's president has declared a nationwide security emergency. Is it enough?
Look, it's initially words. He's talking about putting some more boots on the ground to make that happen. I think he's getting pressure. We've discussed that before from the US president. There's conversations going on at that sort of a level. I think he's sort of feeling the heat, and he knows that his country is going to need to do something. This is a situation that can't go on, and I think now with 300 children being kidnapped, that's right in everyone's faces that this is a real tragedy.
And as you and I have spoken about before, we know Nigeria remains one of the most dangerous places in the world for Christians. Open Doors says nearly 70% of all Christians killed for their faith last year were murdered in Nigeria. Now, let's talk about Pete Hegseth. We know that US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth met with Nigeria's National Security Advisor and his team to discuss the horrific violence against Christians in their country. Now, this comes after Donald Trump ordered the Defence Department to prepare for possible fast military action if in Nigeria, if the government there didn't do more to prevent the killing of Christians. What are your thoughts on this meeting between Hegseth and Nigeria's National Security Advisor?
I think EM meetings are a positive thing, Gabrielle. They've got to start having discussions about the situation and making the point to the Nigerian president that the international community is watching it and can't tolerate this. And there are Nigerians living all over the world who look back and say, this is our land, this is our people. We as people ourselves look back and say, this just can't be tolerated. So that is a good meeting. I hope that basically it prompts the National Security Advisor to take that back to the president. The president seems to be not ignoring the situation, but of course we will see in the coming days and weeks and months just exactly what these words translate to.
Pope Leo has called for the release of hostages in Nigeria. Let's take a listen.
Ho appreso con immensa tristezza le notizie dei rapimenti di sacerdoti, fedeli, studenti nella Nigeria e nel Camerun. Sento forte il dolore soprattutto per i tanti ragazzi e ragazze sequestrati e per le loro famiglie angosciate. Rivolgo un accorato appello affinché vengano subito liberati gli ostaggi ed esorto le autorità competenti a prendere decisioni adeguate e tempestive per assicurarne il rilascio. Preghiamo per questi nostri fratelli e sorelle e perché sempre e ovunque le chiese e le scuole restino luoghi di sicurezza e di speranza.
Rapper Nicki Minaj is continuing to speak out about this. She shared that video on X and wrote, "Dear God, release your immediate intervention in this matter, rescue the hostages, and may the peace that surpass all understanding fall upon their families right now. Lord, we know your power. With faith and thanksgiving in advance, we claim the victory in the mighty name of Jesus." We've spoken about Nicki Minaj on this program before, and it certainly helps having celebrities like her speaking out and really shining a light on what's happening.
Yeah, look, it's not the flavour of the month to really be sharing probably tweeting Pope Leo's words, but I'm very encouraged by what Pope Leo said. I mean, he's ultimately my boss, Aid to the Church in Need. We saw him recently. He expressed his concern, and it's very important that he comes out and does what he's doing. He doesn't have, an army. He has words as a moral leader, and it's important that those words be repeated over and over. So I'm very encouraged by what he's saying, and I think hopefully people keep hearing and sharing. So good on Nicki for doing the same.
Finally, Bernard, your organisation, Aid to the Church in Need, is currently in its Red November campaign. Can you tell us a bit about what the initiative is about?
Yeah, internationally, it is a time to shine light on not Christian persecution of all people, of all faiths. And 750 churches, cathedrals, secular buildings around the world have been lit up in red across the last weeks. In Australia, we've had 15 cathedrals lighting red, a bunch of 50, 60 churches doing the same, getting involved and letting people know that persecution of those of faith continues to be a problem. 413 million Christians living in countries where they can't freely live their faith. So Red November is happening now, and it's been something that we've really tried to highlight, very much connected to what we're seeing in Nigeria, and it's very pertinent this time to keep on sharing the situation.
Bernard Tatunji, National Director of Aid to the Church in Need, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gabriella.
Joining us now is Mia Schlicht, Research Fellow at the IPA. Mia, great to see you again. Thank you for your time. Let's start with the BBC. The BBC chair has admitted that the broadcaster took too long to address the controversial documentary that President Trump has called false, defamatory, disparaging and inflammatory, which it was. It, of course, doctored the speech that the president delivered on January 6th to make it look like he was inciting violence. Now, BBC's chair has said that I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to apologise to all the people who believe in the BBC, care for it and wish for it to survive and thrive. Mia, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, the BBC took too long to address this controversy, as the BBC's chair went on to admit. But is the BBC going to change? Its bias has really been exposed.
Well, absolutely, this apology took too long. I mean, when he says this, wants to apologise to all the people who wishes for the BBC to thrive, I'm not really sure how many are left. I think there's only a handful of viewers who still actually watch the BBC. But look, I'm glad he has finally apologised. I'm glad the BBC has come clean about this. Trump had to drag them kicking and screaming, and they were really left with no choice here. But do I think this is the end? No, I don't think Trump's going to be satisfied with this lacklustre apology, because it wasn't really a full apology. It was about halfway there. But the point here is that the reason Trump's not going to back down on this one is because Trump isn't being petty. He isn't looking for an apology to stroke his ego. What he is doing is he is pointing out the systemic bias that has existed in taxpayer-funded institutions like the BBC in the UK and like the ABC here in Australia, and pointing out just how long they have gotten away with just appalling journalistic standards. So whilst I'm glad the BBC has come clean about this time, it really just asks the question, what the hell is the ABC doing? Where is their apology? They are sitting on their hands doing nothing. They've been caught out doing meeting these terrible journalistic standards just like the BBC, and yet they're doing nothing. I think there are hundreds and thousands of people both in the UK and in Australia who are sick of bankrolling these taxpayer-funded institutions who wouldn't survive another day in the private market.
Oh, absolutely. I think so many people here in Australia and over in the UK as well are pretty frustrated. Now, the UK Labor government has broken an election promise, I should say, by announcing a $52 billion increase in taxes. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says that ordinary people will have to pay a little bit more. Let's take a listen.
I recognise that we are asking people to contribute more by freezing those allowances. They were already frozen by the previous government from 2021 to 2028, and we're freezing them for a further 3 years. And I do recognise that I was asking ordinary people to pay a little bit more.
Mia, how much political damage does this do?
This is a disastrous budget. I think this is going to be a huge hit to Reeves and Starmer. I mean, someone in the Telegraph posted a fantastic article today and called it a socialist budget, and that's what it is. This budget is a full-on grip on socialism. It is completely and utterly disastrous, particularly for the middle class and mainstream Britons. I mean, it's a very old-fashioned budget. It's basically tax higher and spend more, and that spending will go to more handouts, more welfare. It might help those people on the fringes, but it will do absolutely nothing to raise the living standards of those in Britain. I think they're pretty tired of it. This budget is killing aspirations. It is basically the end of the great dream in Britain of owning your own home or climbing up the property ladder with all the different taxes that are going to be imposed. And I think looking in this context, looking at the state of the economy, of the state of out-of-control migration, the state of crime, it is no wonder that Britons are leaving the UK in droves. They are fleeing. Investment in Britain is fleeing. And jobs and opportunities are all going offshore. And it's no shock when a budget like this is handed down why there are so many people who are just they've lost all enchantment with the UK.
And it's so sad, it really is. Well, there are reports that Sir Keir Starmer, UK's Prime Minister, he's planning to exit by Christmas amid claims he's handing out CVs during international trips as he considers life after Westminster. Now, as you kind of touched on, it's just UK, it's a disaster over there. There's illegal migrants continuing to arrive unchecked, growth has flatlined, inflation has remained stubbornly high, and unemployment is starting to rise. Mia, what do you make of these reports, though, that Starmer could be gone by Christmas?
These reports don't shock me at all. Starmer hasn't been performing well for a very, very long time. Basically, from the day he was elected, the polls continuously went down, and I've mentioned it before, but look, Starmer wasn't elected because there was any great support for him. He wasn't an inspiring leader. Voting for Starmer was just basically a vote to kick out the Tories, but it wasn't because people wanted Starmer, but I do think people are shocked at just how poorly Starmer has continued to perform, and I think it was the Labor MPs themselves who said that this budget will either make or break Starmer. Well, I think it's pretty clear that this will break Starmer. There's no coming back from this. I do think that he will try and kibosh Reeves first, and he'll try and hide behind her, put all the blame on her and try and hang on a little bit longer, but I don't think it will work because what this budget shows is that he doesn't get it. He does not understand how broken Britain is. You're legislating a couple of handouts here and there in this budget, you have no idea how much Britain is struggling under these disastrous policies. And I think people in the UK, they're looking for an aspiring leader, someone who stands by them. And you have a leader who just completely doesn't get it. His values and his principles do not align with the UK. He's more focused on all the globalist issues that are happening around the world. He doesn't stand with Britain. And that's why Britain doesn't stand with him. So if he's handing out his CVs, he's going to have to look overseas, because he seems far more interested in all the issues such as climate change and hanging out at the COP summit. So maybe he needs to seek a job there, just like Chris Bowen.
You're spot on. You're exactly right. And as you kind of mentioned, people in the UK are looking for an inspiring leader, someone who actually stands with them. And we're seeing Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, riding high in the polls. A new survey of Conservative Party members found 54% believe that Nigel Farage could become Prime Minister by 2028 or 2029. What's your assessment of this?
Again, this poll doesn't surprise me. I think he will become Prime Minister. I think he's got what it takes. The only problem here is that there is a long way for Farage to go. So he needs to ride this momentum for as long as he can. But as much as he needs to ride the momentum of rage, he also needs to ride the momentum of discipline. And I think that's a far harder thing to do, because whilst he has shown that he has great capacity to lead the country, he also needs to show that he has great capacity to lead his party. And I think that's currently where a bit of struggle is coming through. I mean, many of the established parties, they have very elaborate administrative wings, and he just doesn't have that. And at the end of the day, he's going to have to run good candidates in 500 seats, and I'm not sure at the moment he's showing that he's up to that task. I'm not saying he can't do it, but that will be the next challenge. But certainly I think what Farage has shown, and he is a real example for centre-right parties all across the Western world, that if you take on the culture wars, you will win. I mean, especially here in Australia, we've had the centre-right parties running away from the culture wars because the left for so long has told them that if they dare go near it, they'll lose. Well, it's no wonder the left has tried to tell them to stay away, because even the left understands that the right will always win the culture wars. So I applaud Farage for how much he has stood up in these battles. He is streaming ahead in the polls, and I just hope he can maintain that discipline if he wants to be Prime Minister at the next election.
Finally, staying in the UK, a Labor-run council in Brighton has cancelled an art exhibition featuring Union flags, claiming that the flags could offend, scare, or even put visitors and their belongings at risk. Now, the artist calls this outright censorship. His work was designed to celebrate diversity, yet the council scrapped the show over fears the Union flag itself might be taken out of context. Mia, can I get your reaction to this?
Well, just to my point before, this just shows if you fight the culture wars, you can win. But in this situation, I don't think there needs to be much fight. The left, cancel culture, they will always end up eating themselves. I mean, this example is just really outrageous. Like, we need some clarification. What exactly here is it that's offensive? Is it the display of different multicultures on the flag, or is it the flag, the displaying the Union Jack itself? I think it's pretty clear that this council is offended by the Union Jack because a lot of these councils for a long time, they don't like their country, they're not proud to be in the UK, and that's been made pretty clear. But then you just ask the question, what are you still doing here? If you don't like your own country's flag, what are you doing sitting in the country taking taxpayer funds being floated by the different taxpayers who love their country? They're happy to take all those perks, but then they're the first ones to sit there and criticise and are too offended to even display a flag that doesn't even look like the national flag.
Mia Schlicht, Research Fellow at the IPA, thank you so much for joining us. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.